All right, it looks like we are live. Sorry for the delay here. I'm waiting for my wonderful face to pop up. There we go. All right, guys, we are live. There is a delay. There's about a 3 or 4 second delay on YouTube here to make sure that I'm alive. We are live, and so is Gonzalo Lira. I don't know if you saw the live stream from the Duran. What a beautiful stream it was. Just a quick 5-minute live stream with Gonzalo. He is alive and well. He was indeed picked up by the SBU back on Friday. Come on in, guys. Great to see you. Hi, Matthew. Hey, Strick. Hello. Good to see you guys. Awesome. From Wichita, Kansas, Matthew. Great to have you here. He was picked up back on Friday, April 15th. His phone and computer were confiscated. He is not allowed to leave the city of Kharkov in Ukraine, but he is alive and well. Thank God. We'll have to call him Lazarus, right? He rose again after several days of reports of his death, which I found, again, as a fellow YouTuber, really hit me hard. So come on in, gang. We are live. Gonzalo Lira is alive. God bless him. Thank the Lord for his safety. And again, his appearance couldn't have been more apropos for today. If you don't know, today is Holy Friday or Good Friday for in the Orthodox calendar. I am Orthodox, and so this is the day that the church commemorates and indeed participates in the cosmic transfiguring death of Christ on the cross, where the cross is transformed into the tree of life, and the curse of death and darkness are absorbed into Christ's own death and transfigured into the blossoming of eternal life and light in his resurrection. So I thought what I would do today is I would address something that is somewhat obviously a cross for the Orthodox Church that it's bearing right now in its present moment, and that, of course, is the war in Ukraine. And specifically, I want to address this crisis as it relates to the Orthodox Church. We've been talking about the political ramifications of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We've been talking about the economic ramifications of the change of the globalist world order into a post-globalist, post-secular order. Now, I really want to hit that post-secularism, and I want to look at this crisis from the vantage point, particularly the Orthodox Church. We do have to remember this is a crisis between Orthodox brothers. And as I'm Orthodox, this has been particularly difficult for me. And so in today's video, I want to address a number of articles that have been coming out of late that have been very, very critical of some of the comments made by Patriarch Kirill, who's the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church. And I want to look at what those articles are actually missing. I'm not going to contradict the articles so much as I'm going to point out I think they're presenting an incomplete picture. I agree with an observation that was made recently by the Anglican priest Giles Fraser, who basically said that if you think that Putin or the Patriarch of Moscow, if you think they're mad or insane or nuts or just plain overtly evil, that's just another way of saying you probably don't understand them. or better, you just don't understand what's the complexities of what's really going on here. Again, in the end, maybe they are mad, crazy, evil, and so forth. In the end, that may in fact be the case. But, and I am, you have to understand, I'm not here to take sides. I offer this video in that spirit that Father Giles had put forward. I'm trying to understand, and I want to help my audience understand. I am not here to take sides. Again, being Orthodox, this whole war is a tragedy in its totality. All right, the last thing I want to see is Orthodox brothers fighting each other. But I do want to try to offer some analysis of what's going on so that we can better understand what's unfolding before our very eyes in terms of the rise of this new post-globalist world we're all about to enter into, and thereby try to make some semblance of sense in all this. Now, before we begin, just a little housekeeping as you're all coming in. Great to see you guys. Sorry, I got my screen over here, my camera over here. But we got a little housekeeping here. As many of you know, we've been having some issues behind the scenes of this channel. Super Chats has been disabled by YouTube, so I'm not going to be able to answer your questions or receive your Super Chats. Many of you have been very kind to ask how you can support me in the midst of all this. And perhaps, remember, I have quit my job, my teaching job, to be full-time here as a broadcaster. And I have to say the single best way to help support this channel and what I'm doing, the work I'm doing, is to click on the link below and sign up with our Change America program. So Change America is a program that rounds off your purchases to the nearest dollar. And with that spare change, you can support this channel and other organizations that are dedicated to defending and promoting the values of faith, family, and freedom that we all care most deeply about. So it's an absolutely wonderful program where you can make a difference just by purchasing a cup of coffee. Really, it's that cool. So make sure to click on the link below, sign up, or learn more about our Change America initiative. And I can't thank you enough for your support during this time. All right, gang, so let's dive right in here. So let me give you a feel of some of the headlines that have been coming out of late regarding sort of the spiritual dimension of this war in Ukraine. So this is from the Financial Times. Russian Orthodox Church lends legitimacy to Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. This is from the Washington Post. The Christian nationalism behind Putin's war. This is from, where are you from? I don't know. Oh, the EU Observer. The patriarch who's in lockstep with Putin. And the byline is, as Russia's brutal war of aggression in Ukraine has escalated, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, has not said a word against Russian aggression. This is from Unheard. Putin's spiritual destiny. The religious president wants to rebuild Christendom. I mean, you're getting a sense of it here. And several weeks back, what they're all more or less responding to, several weeks back, Patriarch Kirill gave a sermon that did address Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I'm going to quote some of what he had to say, and this is what so many of these commenters are bouncing off of. Here's some of what Kirill had to say. We have entered into a struggle that has not a physical but a metaphysical significance. In other words, a spiritual significance, something that transcends politics when all is said and done. For 8 years, there have been attempts to destroy what exists in the Donbass. So this is referring to the breakaway republics of Lugansk and Donetsk. And in Donbass, the people there are they are engaged in a fundamental rejection of the so-called values that are offered today by those who claim world power. So he doesn't name them specifically, but most commentators would, well, all commentators would assert that he's talking here about Western liberal globalists in Washington, D.C. and Brussels. So in other words, the people of the Donbass, the breakaway republics, who are primarily Russian, they've rejected the secularizing values of the West, those who claim world power. Now, he goes on. The countries which do not accept these secular liberal values are not considered part of the world by these secular liberal powers. It's very interesting. In other words, if you're a nation who does not accept secularized liberal values, you do not legitimately belong to the world order. The world order is governed by secular liberal powers. And then he goes on to argue that Western powers offer what Kirill calls here a, quote, test of loyalty for all nations to their secularized values. And that test is the demand that all nations hold gay pride parades, which Kirill here sees as a ritual of acclamation into the Western globalist vision of the world. So he sees gay pride parades as much more than just parades, right? He sees it as really a ritual of initiation into the secularized values of the Western world. And he went on to say that such a test of loyalty, these parades, is ultimately about the destruction of human civilization as we've known it. He said, quote, "If humanity accepts that such a sin is not a violation of God's law," in other words, if we accept this as normal, if humanity believes that it's merely a variation of human behavior, alternative lifestyle, then human civilization will indeed have ended right there. And so this is why you're getting a number of these headlines like this one from the week. War in Ukraine is a metaphysical battle against a civilization built on gay parades, Russian Orthodox leader says. Well, that's not what he said, if you are able to read. If you've taken the basic hermeneutics course, which is the art and science of reading a written text. What I want to do here for you is just offer some analysis of what Kirill is saying. And this is analysis based on a number of studies that have been done over the last several years on the renewal of Orthodox Russia and their sentiments towards Western liberalism, and see how these studies help us to make sense of things. Again, I must stress, I am not defending this, okay? I'm not a shill for Putin or for the Moscow Patriarch. I'm not even a member of the Russian Orthodox Church, okay? So just, I know there's going to be some simple-minded trolls out there who no doubt will accuse me of being a Putin stooge. I get it, I know that comes with the territory. But for those of you who are actually interested in trying to understand the rise of a post-secular world and really trying to understand what's going on here, my interest is exactly that. My interest is the same it's been for the last 5.5 years since I started this channel. I am solely interested in trying to understand the kind of world that's rising from the ashes of liberal globalism. Liberal globalism, the dominant world order since the end of World War II, is collapsing. I've made several arguments of why I believe it is politically and economically literally imploding as a result of the Ukrainian war. And we are therefore entering a post-global, post-liberal, post-secular age. And my task as a PhD analyst is to help others better understand the whole notion of this new world post-globalist order that's rising. Okay, and that's at the end. That's all I'm interested in. That's the spirit in which I'm offering this analysis. I'm not a cheerleader. Okay, there are plenty of cheerleaders out there. I'm not one of them. So don't get mad at me if I'm not a cheerleader, and don't accuse me of being one. There you go. So that's what I'm trying to, those are the two positions I'm trying to navigate through here. All right, so what's going on here? What is this Christian nationalism that the Washington Post is talking about behind the Ukrainian war? What is this revitalized Christian civilization that another author is talking about? I think the first thing we have to understand in terms of the spiritual outworkings of this horrific war is we have to understand that there is a radical difference between how the Russian Orthodox Church understands the culture wars and the way particularly we patriots, tend to understand, but even liberals understand them here in the West. There's the Russian scholar John Anderson in his book, Conservative Christian Politics in Russia and the United States. It's an excellent book if you want to get it. It was published about 10 years ago. Conservative Christian Politics in Russia and in the United States by John Anderson. He makes a very interesting distinction when it comes to this whole notion of fighting the culture wars. Christian conservatism in Russia and Christian conservatism in the United States, when it comes to the culture wars, actually find themselves fighting on very different battlefields. It's vitally important to understand. While conservative Christians here in the West, here in the States, for example, we tend to see culture wars as a civil war, right? But Russians, particularly the Russian Orthodox Church, they tend to see the culture wars as a foreign invasion. Now, this is key. So when we think of culture wars, we think of fighting the Democrats, or the other way around, right? If you're a liberal Democrat, you're fighting the culture wars against these crazy, patriot right-wing fascist Republicans or whatever like that. Look at, we got it going on in France right now, right? It's Le Pen, the far-right Le Pen versus the globalist Macron. Or, here in the States, it's patriot Republicans versus liberal Democrats, you name it, okay? Regardless, the culture war is understood thoroughly in Civil War terms, which means, and this is very interesting, which means in many respects I'm fighting this war with my neighbor. I'm fighting the culture war with my neighbor. I'm a conservative Republican, so I'm fighting the culture war with my neighbor who happens to vote Democrat. But I like my neighbor. We always say hello. We always get along, right? That's what we're all experiencing. We're fighting culture wars in our schools with their administration. But I like my school. The school that my kids go to is great. I just wish they didn't teach all this crap. That's the kind of thinking we have. We're fighting a civil war in that we're fighting with our brothers, literally, right? Our neighbors, I should say. We're fighting with people that we otherwise tend to like. Not all the time, I get it. But that also tends to be in the abstract, right? It tends to be figures we've never met that we project our ire upon. But when it comes to our neighbors, when it comes to family members, we've all got family members who are of a different cultural war persuasion than we are. That's the kind of culture war we're fighting. What John Anderson, the Russian scholar, points out, Russia's fighting a very different battlefield. It's fighting a very different culture war. Russia does not think of culture wars in civil war terms. The culture war instead for Russia is a foreign invasion. Secular liberalism represents outside forces, particularly Western forces, that are inherently hostile to the timeless Russian values that give Russia its own unique cultural identity and the resources for its preservation. So we have to understand that when Kirill talks this way about denouncing pride parades and the like, we have to understand what he's talking about here. These aren't just cheap culture war points. This hits very deep into the Russian soul. And I've talked with Russians about this. He is talking about the invasion of a foreign culture that will once again do irreparable harm to Christian society and Russia. Once again, because, remember, Russians are very sensitive to Western ideas because they see now this new post-Marxist, post-communist Russia sees itself as having been ravaged for 70 years by a Western idea, which was Marxism. Karl Marx was Western, as far as I'm concerned. So Western Enlightenment ideas invaded Russia and literally decimated the church and Russian culture for 70 years, from which now Russia is rising again. Neo-Orthodox Russia is rising again. So that's one way it's done irreparable harm to Christian society. But, and this is key, because you'll hear this all the time coming from Kirill and from other Russian officials, Russian Orthodox officials, Russia's concerned that these foreign invading liberal ideas are going to irreparably ravage Christian society, not because they already have in Russia, but because they already have in the West. In other words, it's not so much an issue about pride parades. It's the fact that these pride parades happen. Again, this is coming from the Russian Orthodox perspective. It's the fact that these parades happen without the slightest whimper of protest from a single major Christian church in the West. Take, for example, and this is something that's come up, take, for example, a recent case of what happened in Finland, who wants to join NATO now. I don't know if you followed this, but a Finnish MP, a member of parliament, was criminally charged by a Finnish court after tweeting out a Bible verse. Did you hear about this? This is from February of this year. Finland may be viewed as I'm just reading from my namesake's write-up of this, Jonathan Turley. Finland may be viewed as the happiest place to live, but not if you value free speech. A major free speech case is brewing in the country after a member of parliament was criminally charged after tweeting a quotation from the Bible in opposition to her church's sponsorship. That's the Finnish Lutheran Church. Her church's sponsorship of an LGBT pride event. This MP is reportedly facing up to 2 years in prison for tweeting out a scripture verse. Now, you should know, since then, this MP's member of parliament was found not guilty. Thank God for that. But what we have to understand here, again, for better or for worse, what we have to understand is this never would have happened in Orthodox Russia today. This is how the Russian Orthodox Patriarch is thinking. Under the Soviets, sure, someone would have been jailed for tweeting back then, right? Or just sending out, making public a Bible verse. But not under New Orthodox Russia. That somebody getting put on trial, let alone jailed for tweeting out a Bible verse is unthinkable. It's unimaginable in a neo-Orthodox Russia. And not only was this MP put on trial, but she was put on trial without a freaking whimper from any major church organization in the West. In fact, it appears, I don't know, but it appears that the Finnish church would seem to support that, would seem to support the persecution of this MP. So this is Russia's major concern, that the Western church, for right or for wrong, again, I'm not a stooge here. I'm trying to understand what's happening here. For right or wrong, they are claiming that the Western church has been irreparably compromised by Western liberalism. And to make matters even worse, far from defending Christian values, as far as Kirill is concerned, the Orthodox Church in particular, under the leadership of Patriarch Bartholomew, if you know, the Orthodox Church has a spiritual head. He's nothing like the Pope by any means, but a spiritual head known as the Patriarch of Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. Bartholomew, who's the Patriarch of Constantinople, only served to further expand these radicalizing, secularized influences of the West by some actions he took in 2019. Again, this is from Russia's perspective. If you don't know, back in 2019, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was actually granted independence from the Russian Orthodox Church by Bartholomew after he was lobbied very, very heavily by the then virulently anti-Russian Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko. He's the one who's in that Biden video with the quid pro quo and all that, the supposed quid pro quo. But and he was militantly opposed to Russia. He wanted to join up with Europe, and he knew in order to do that, he needed to have the spiritual backing of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And what they basically did is they created their own version of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Up to that point, for centuries, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church was in a fraternal Slavic spiritual union with Moscow. And now, as a result of this decision a few years back, they split from Moscow. And even in a speech, very, again, triumphalist speech by Poroshenko, he called that day that they were granted autokephale, is the technical term from the Patriarch of Constantinople. He said it was a great victory for the devout Ukrainian nation over the Moscow demons. And it was a victory of good over evil, of light over darkness. So obviously the Russian Orthodox Church, and by the way, half of the Ukrainian church, they didn't go along with this. But obviously, the Russian Orthodox Church, which has been fraternally connected with the Ukrainian Church for centuries, are absolutely furious with the Constantinople Patriarch interfering in their jurisdiction in that way without consulting with them and the like. And so this has created an enormous rift in the Orthodox Church with the Russian Church basically rejecting now the primacy of Bartholomew, and they see him really, and they've come out and said they see him as really nothing more than a puppet of Biden and the bullies in Brussels that are working at stealing. Again, this is from the Russian Orthodox perspective, stealing away their spiritual brotherhood with Ukraine. As a matter of fact, Putin has said that Ukraine, at least eastern Ukraine, is part of the spiritual space, so the spiritual home or sphere of Russian Orthodox civilization. Again, for right or for wrong is not what I'm arguing. I'm trying to make sure we understand the dynamics, the multi-layered dynamics that are behind all of this. This is part of the post-secular world we're entering into. So the Russian Orthodox Church, again, for right or for wrong, sees itself with all of these developments. The Russian Orthodox Church sees itself as basically alone in defending a Christendom that has yet to be infested with secular liberalism. It sees the Western Church as totally compromised. And then when you link this up with the rise of Russia as a civilization state, which we've been talking about a lot on this channel, where Russia sees itself increasingly as a defender of the Orthodox Slavic world, which extends far beyond Russian borders, right? Decoupled and walled off from the liberal Western world. When you put all that together, then the result is rather predictable. A renewed Orthodox Russian, full cooperation between church and state in what's known as symphonia, the union between church and state in the defense of Christian civilization. In full cooperation between church and state, this renewed Orthodox Russia sees itself alone as the true defender of classical Christendom and the traditional lands that have been a part of that civilization for centuries. And it can no longer rely on Western churches that have been unduly compromised by secular liberalism. And Russia alone will faithfully fulfill its role as the defender of post-liberal, post-secular Christian values in its own autonomous civilizational sphere. That, I believe, is what's happening from the Russian Orthodox perspective. So again, let me say, as an Orthodox Christian, particularly on this Holy Friday, I find this entire situation utterly tragic. I think it's splitting the church, the Orthodox Church, in ways that I believe may be irreparable for the foreseeable future. But I do believe that this is the logic behind much of what's going on today. And as such, in understanding this logic, I think we get a better understanding of the kind of political and indeed religious world order that's rising from the ashes of an increasingly imploding globalism. And so with that, gang, I'm going to have to leave you. I have services to attend. Also, if those of you like Sebastian Gorka, I'll be on Sebastian Gorka's program at 2 o'clock. So tune in there to talk about other things like the implosion of woke media in the form of Netflix and Twitter and Disney and CNN Plus and the like. It should be a lot of fun. A absolute blessed Good Friday and Pascha to all of you, but especially my Orthodox Christian brothers and sisters. Let's all pray for the peace in the world, salvation of our souls, and most especially peace in Ukraine. God bless you all. Love you. See you.